the thing that we really need to be saying is, think of Hakadosh Baruch Hu as the author of everything, right? Imagine an author writing a book. When the author writes the story and says, oh, and this character in the story, like the way that Chazal are telling these stories about, the guy with the pearl in his hat, right? When Hakadosh Baruch Hu writes the story, so to speak, or when an author writes the story first, let's say, so an author in this world writes a story about a character, and the character engages in some actions, and then later something bad happens to the character that's fitting as punishment for the actions that he committed that were wrong or something like that. We don't look at that whole process and say, how did the author make that happen? How did the author bring about the reshaping of that fictional world that the author has created? Because we recognize the unlimited ease with which the author can make anything happen in that world, because it's just a matter of writing the story that way, right? And that there's no impediment to letting that be the unfolding of events. If you have authorship, you have control. And I think the funny thing is that it's actually quite easy to make, I think, better sense of the events of this world by making use of that analogy a little bit, that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the author, we anyway get what we perceive to be the laws of nature from some process by which a universe comes into being that we can never make a science of, because it stands outside the realm of what scientific reasoning can do. You can never make science out of the question, why is there something instead of nothing? And why does the something have the laws that it does and not other laws? Because there is no way of empirically observing and testing and studying the process of universe creation standing outside the universe. That's a contradiction in terms. So to the degree that there is a world and it seems to work, it contains a set of events that unfold a certain way, the authorship of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in all that is pertains to all of that equally. And it is already an unnecessary mistake for us to imagine somehow that whereas certain things in the world, like a cannonball flying from one place to another in a parabolic arc, that happens according to these rules that we can discern. And that's the way that part of the world works. But what I'm trying to understand is, how is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes also the world work in such a way that maybe I make a mistake and I commit some kind of transgression, and as a result, he wants to invite me to do tshuva, and so something happens to me that I will interpret as a punishment, and that will cause me to do tshuva, right? The idea that, well, because one part of the world works according to physics, the other part of the world should also, but it has to work according to some spiritual physics or mystical physics because it's a different set of causal relationships. What's upside down about that is that we're the ones who invented the idea that one part of the world does work, quote unquote, according to physics. Physics is a human construction that we place on the events of the world. It's an interpretation of the story, or a piece of the story, that we find useful in making sense of the relationship between these events and those events. And so I think that the unified frame is just to say, it's all one story. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the author of the story. He is as unlimited as any author would be in choosing for anything to happen. And what's very mind-bending is that this is a story about people who are aware that they are characters in the story and who are invited by the author through their choices to seek relationship with the author. And he writes a story about their choices.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.